broadcast journalism.
Well, thank you for inviting me on this, John. It's a pleasure to be a part of this. It's a very strange time for the profession and also for the way I'm dealing with all this as well professionally. First and foremost, this is really one of the biggest stories in peacetime that there is. I can't remember any story in my near 30 years in journalism where a story changes so rapidly, not only with what we're reporting in the UK with the Downing Street press conferences, the daily deaths coming in, the testing, what's happening with the Prime Minister and his health, not only national news rolling so quickly, but internationally getting responses and reactions from death tolls in Spain, in Germany, from what's happening in America. It's changing so rapidly. I have never known such a big story like this in my near 30 years, and probably for other people in living memory, as I say, the biggest peacetime story that we've had internationally, globally.
Yeah. In terms of the news bulletins that you put together, what percentage does the COVID-19 crisis take up? Is there any space for anything else, or is it just COVID-19 on the bulletins?
Well, one of the broadcasting companies I work for, freelance, is global. And I've been looking after the news on LBC from time to time, or presenting its rolling news service on LBC News. And the story is non-stop COVID-19. And let's not forget, COVID-19 is just one of the strains of the wider coronavirus. And whether you're looking at it from the news angle or the business angle or the sport angle, or even in the entertainment sphere as well, every day there is a constant stream of stories, whether it's affecting business, whether it's affecting any sport, not just football, cricket, basketball, internationally, even in entertainment, with celebrities taking part in this, from the human interest angle. So what we've had over the last few weeks of the Clap for Heroes, the NHS workers, and those beyond that who are helping the country through the pandemic. So it really does spread right across the board on the story, and it just dominates rather every single angle. And just thinking this last night, that trying to introduce another story does sound very weird and very hard to do. In the last 7 days, we've had a new Labour leader elected. So big story, and rightly so, it gets airtime as well. But in a normal news cycle, it would have been massive, considering it's been going on for 3-4 months, trying to get through to who the new Labour leader is. It takes a bit of a byline, even through to slow news days, maybe now with Easter, maybe with other days in the week and stuff. Slow news days, other stories would have come through. This has dominated all the way. And if we think this country alone, how Brexit has dominated since 2016, and the UK leaves the European Union on the 31st of January of this year, and just in the background was COVID-19, coronavirus, just bubbling under. And as soon as we've left, COVID-19, coronavirus, has just taken over completely. And those two news stories have really dominated since 2016. How long will this dominate for? We just don't know.
The question that I really wanted to ask you as well is, in terms of the presenters that you work with, how are they coping with this continual stream of really horrible news? I mean, when you're a talk-based radio station like LBC, I mean, and it's hours and hours of discussions. You've got James O'Brien, Sheila, Andrew Castle, Nick Ferrari, dealing with this, and it's volume, of course. It's not just like one-off call. It's hundreds of people on each. How do they deal with it? I mean, you're driving some of these shows for them. You're producing some. I mean, how do they handle it? Because it's honestly, it must have an effect on them psychologically to be dealing with deaths, people calling in, complaining, upset. The just negative news all the time. How do you cope with it as well as a presenter? How do you deal with it?
Well, for presenters, the ones you mentioned, otherwise, everyone deals with it differently and in their own way. As I mentioned, there are so many angles to this story, whether it's the news, the business, the sport, the human interest, and that's just tickling just the surface of it. There are so many different angles that talk-based radio stations, whether it's here or around the world, aren't short of content to talk about, to relate to people, to hear their own personal stories as well. On LBC News, which is Global's rolling news service that I've been putting together and presenting myself, you're never short of stories, whether it's the human interest side of it, on how people are coping, through to the harder end of it as well. And one thing generally in journalism is, whereas ordinarily the death toll in something would be paramount. If there's an earthquake somewhere and here's an earthquake, here's the number of dead, this is what's happening in the aftermath. With this story, you've got to be very careful that that isn't the dominating angle on it.
Right.
It's more about, yes, the number of dead and the testing and whatever have you is paramount, but you don't lose it within the bulletin, but you put it into context. So here is what else is important at the moment on the wider sphere, and then here are the deaths. So you don't scare people, but at the same time, you need to make them aware of it. And one thing to be aware generally is each day when we're getting these number of deaths coming through from the last 24 hours, one thing that many people aren't aware of is this isn't the amount of people who've died, let's say, on these shores in the last 24 hours. It's when the death has been recorded. Right. So which is why we see on a Tuesday there's more of a jump than there was on the Monday, because the Tuesday's taking in the Saturday and Sunday. Likewise with testing and the number of dead in Germany. In Germany, for example, they're recording their deaths differently. So if you have died, in a care home and you weren't tested positive for COVID-19, but you had it, your death in Germany isn't recorded as a coronavirus death. Oh, right. Likewise here, the deaths are if you've died in a hospital and you tested positive, and that is a COVID-19 death. If you've died of COVID-19 here in a care home or anywhere else, but not in a hospital, it's not counted as one of those daily numbers.
Right. I mean, just to ask you like a business to business question now, and it's a bit more an industry based question. Are you still receiving calls from PRs and media people to kind of place their spokespeople on your shows, their stories? Are you still, receptive to pitches, or is it just not the time at the moment to do that? What's your general approach to things like that at the moment?
It's taken a massive swing, whereas in the early days, we're only talking maybe 3 weeks ago now since the lockdown, and just a little bit more before that when things slowly started slowing down. But let's take the lockdown period. PRs aren't, because nobody can go anywhere. Yes, we've got technology like we're using now, and we're doing this remotely, as we've seen on television. They're relying guests remotely on this. PRs aren't pushing what they are. What I'm seeing from the radio side are those experts, so medical experts, doctors, people who are, let's say, medical editors at newspapers or journals. They're being put forward by their publications, or they're putting themselves forward, because this is really what people want to hear about. They want to know the medical side of things, or the coping side of things, more so than whoever's got a new single out, or there's a new TV program, or I don't know, if Emmerdale and as it has been, and the soaps have been put on hold for now. Okay, fine, it's understandable. But what people don't want to hear about really is how the celebrities are coping. It's a case of that, we all do it in our own ways, and we're all struggling, whether you're in a high-rise flat or in a mansion, but you don't want to hear about the celebrities and their mansions and their vast sprawling gardens as to how they're getting through this, when you may be stuck 20 floors up somewhere and nowhere to go.
And another sort of question I wanted to kind of ask you is, in terms of people moving to radio, I think people have understood. And I'm a big advocate of radio journalism. I think it's dynamic. It breaks stories quickly. And I was brought up on local radio. I love what you're doing. I love everything that you do in terms of local radio. Have you seen a kind of a spike, a boost in the Raja figures for Global in the last few months? Has there been a kind of a movement, towards radio? that you can speak about?
Well, leaving aside global and the radar figures, because the radar are every 4 months, so we would have to wait probably until the summer to know how any radio station which subscribes to the radar listening numbers has performed during this period. But leaving those two aside, you're right. Radio is a medium that can connect so instantly and have reaction so instantly. You know, you can listen to music stations, and there are so many out there commercially in this country on DAB or on FM, but certainly on DAB where it can match your mood, and you can relax that way and have little presenter interaction. Or you can have speech-based radio. We can have a lot of interaction, and you can hear other people's views. It may put your mind at rest. I mean, I've listened to some phone-ins on the business side of things, and furloughing of people, and I knew the basics of it and what you read and hear. But then with such phone-ins with experts, you suddenly find out so much more. So it is a real connecting medium that you can find instantly. Likewise, if people want to go away to the social media channels and watch their own things on YouTube or box sets, or even people are still putting together their own little videos on YouTube, whatever interest. How are we getting through this? I think people are complaining a lot about they can't go out, they can't this, they can't that, and they call it a police state. Well, they should really move to a police state to know what it's really like.
North Korea is a police state.
Sorry?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to go police state, go and live in North Korea. I mean, this is not a police state in any way at all. It's prevention. Now, it's not a joke. It's a serious thing at the moment what we're experiencing. So it's
exactly, and let's not forget, our parents and grandparents and back from them, they didn't have this technology. So we are lucky to be struggling, surviving, getting through this with the technology that we have, than those who 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have this technology. We literally would have waited for the daily newspaper and the television news bulletin to come on, every few hours, and radio. Well, imagine radio without being able to call anyone up around the world and just relying on a phone line.
Can I just ask you finally as well, in terms of your daily routine going into work, do you literally go into the studio, or are you doing everything remotely now? How's the operational side of your work changed now?
I haven't been going into my main company I work for as a freelance for radio is Global. So I haven't been going into the building there in London's Leicester Square or the studio since about the 20th of March. Everything that I've been doing, I've been doing from my setup here, my home studio. And I put a photo on yesterday on my social media of the studio. And
I saw the comments. So tell us a bit more about the equipment and what kind of stuff you're using, because everyone is like interested to know what the experts are doing. So tell us a bit more about your equipment, Philip, if you can.
Sure, it's quite simple. I think first and foremost, you need to be audio visual, and when I knew we were doing this a few days ago, I thought, right, I'm going, because I haven't got a video camera in my studio. It's all audio based. I couldn't find anywhere that could sell me a webcam.
Gosh.
Even on eBay, you had to wait almost 2 weeks for it and stuff. So webcam sales have gone through the roof.
Right.
So have headsets as well. I've heard as well, because everyone is wants to be connecting with family or professionally. And then I found that my Surface Pro's got a camera on it, and it's full HD, which is fabulous.
Good stuff. Yeah.
So quite simply, it's connecting to the internet. When I'm doing presenting radio programs, I'm remotely controlling all the technology, the jingles, the adverts, everything back at Global in Leicester Square, 9 miles away from my home. From home, by clicking the mouse. Gosh. And it sends the command down the chain, and it fires it nationally, internationally, for people to hear. Wow. I've got my microphone here, my Sontronics Orpheus, so I'm using that broadcast quality. It all feeds into a mixing desk, which is all hidden away underneath that I can control. And it all goes back to my PC and down the broadband line, just like now. We are speaking here via Skype.
Yeah, well, it's great to get your insight as a kind of an expert in the field. Phillip Chryssikos is a radio broadcast journalist and a voiceover professional. You can hear him on LBC. When are you next on, Phillip, so we can catch you and listen to you?
Well, it's Good Friday. It's the afternoon, so I'm presenting on LBC News on DAB digital radio. You can get it on the Global Player app and via the lbcnews.co.uk website. Presenting drive time this afternoon from 4 until 8 o'clock this evening. Rolling news, all about coronavirus and what's happening, how it's affecting us, and we'll also be taking the live press briefing from Downing Street, probably about 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon.
Great. Well, we're going to tune in to listen to you. Keep up the great work and keep well and safe. And thank you for today's contribution.
You too as well, John, and thank you for inviting me as well. Thank you.